When I was 16, a killer broke into our house, tortured and murdered my mother, and burned the place to the ground, erasing all the evidence. I was there. I watched the whole thing. My dad, my uncle, the cops, they asked me over and over what happened that night. I kept my mouth shut. They thought the trauma had made me mute, so they handed me a pen and paper, asking me to write down what the killer looked like. Still stayed silent. I didn't move a muscle. 10 years later, I'm 26. Because of my mother's unresolved murder, my dad and I had a falling out. We hadn't seen each other in 8 years, but suddenly he showed up. I came home from my shift to my tiny studio apartment, opened the door, and saw him sitting there with Uncle Leo. Both of them looked at me with freezing cold eyes. "Vivian, did you kill your mother?" My body went completely rigid. I clenched my teeth, glaring at him with pure rage. He was my father. How could he even think for a second that I would kill my own mother? My dad read my expression and let out a cold, bitter laugh. "Then why won't you tell us who did it? It's been 10 years, Vivian. How do you sleep at night? How do you eat? When you dream, does Susan's burned body crawl out and ask you why you didn't avenge her?" I avoided his eyes and looked down. I didn't know how to face him. He was only 46, but he looked 64. The night my mom died, his hair turned white overnight. After that, he sold the house, the car, and everything we owned. He became obsessed, chasing leads like a madman, never giving up. For 10 long years now, his back was hunched, but the burning desire for revenge in his eyes was still as sharp as ever. And now he was locking onto me. "Vivian, how long are you going to play mute? I've been following you. You're not mute. I saw you talking with my own eyes." Furious, he pulled out his phone and played a blurry video. It was me walking down the street at a corner. I suddenly stopped, looked up and murmured, don't worry, don't worry." Then I looked down and kept walking. I had no idea my own father was stalking and doubting me. Suddenly, he grabbed my collar like a lunatic. "You know who the killer is. Why won't you speak? Why play dumb? There's only one explanation. You did it. You killed your mother." Leo couldn't take it anymore. He pulled David away from me enough. "My sister was tortured for hours before she died. How could Vivian do that to her?" My dad's teeth gritted so hard I could hear them grinding. "She hated her mother. She's a psycho. She's capable of anything, even if she didn't pull the trigger. She's an accomplice." Looking into my dad's bloodshot eyes, seeing the complex storm of emotions inside them, I knew my worst nightmare had come true. My dad had found out about the other case from 10 years ago. When I was 16, I was a sophomore in high school. My parents were always out of town running their business, and my grandma was too old to look after me. So my mom came back to our small town, rented an apartment for me, and stayed with me for a few months. Because she had been away for so long and I was at that sensitive, awkward teenage phase, we barely spoke. We weren't close at all. I went to school. She focused on her work. I usually came home late, but because she had to meet clients, negotiate prices, and go to business dinners, she came home even later. Once I felt like someone was stalking me on my way home. I told her about it and asked her to pick me up after school. She promised she would, but she flaked. I waited for her at school until midnight. A massive thunderstorm hit. I couldn't find anywhere to hide from the rain, so I had to run all the way home through the storm. That night, the nightmare happened while taking a shortcut through a dark alley. The stalker jumped out and tackled me to the ground. Pouring rain and loud thunder swallowed my screams. When I finally stumbled back home, I was covered in half rain, half blood. My mom was fast asleep on the couch, the living room smelling heavily of alcohol. Vivian woken up by the metallic smell of blood. My mom opened her eyes when she saw what I looked like. She sobered up instantly. She threw her arms around me and sobbed hysterically. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Vivian. It's all my fault. It's all my fault." She said she was on her way to get me, but then a supplier offered her a drink, and she thought she could get a cheaper deal if she stayed. She thought I'd be fine, maybe because of the physical pain, or maybe because of the burning hatred. I pushed her away. I didn't want her to touch me. I only said one word, 911. My mom started crying even harder. "We can't call the cops, Vivian. If we call the cops, everyone in this town will know. How will you face people at school? What about your future, your college applications? Mom is here, okay? I won't leave anymore. I'll stay here and protect you." But less than 3 months later, she was brutally murdered. With her death, I thought that nightmare would stay buried forever. But my dad had found out, slammed a worn, wrinkled notebook onto the table. "Your mother kept a diary before she died. She wrote down all the important things. She was afraid someone would find it, so she locked it in a metal box and hid it. It survived the fire, and now I have it. My dad grabbed my collar again, shaking me. Your mom made a mistake, but she didn't mean to. She didn't call the cops because she wanted to protect your reputation. How could you kill her for that? Are you even human? My dad's screams made my ears ring. But inside us, Leo didn't try to stop him this time. Instead, with trembling hands, he picked up the diary from the table. It was indeed my mom's neat handwriting. She had written about her guilt, and how her negligence had led to my assault. There were smudges on the paper, likely from her tears. Could feel her deep agonizing regret in every word. Leo finished reading, wiped his eyes, and said with a shaky voice, "David, calm down. Even with this, it doesn't prove Vivian is the killer. My sister was stabbed over 30 times. And there were signs of sexual assault. Vivian couldn't have done that." Leo pushed my dad away, grabbing my hands with pleading eyes. "Vivian, did you hold a grudge against your mom? So you're hiding the killer to punish her? Is that why you won't help us find him? I swear to God, Vivian, if you just tell us who did it so your mom can rest in peace, I will get him myself. I'll carve up the bastard who hurt you with my own hands." Leo's eyes were bloodshot, his gaze so intense I had to look away. Before I could react, my dad let out another bitter laugh. "You won't need to do that. That piece of trash is already dead. And Vivian probably killed him. The police are already investigating. We'll have answers soon." "Vivian, I don't want to throw my own daughter in prison, but I can't let Susan rest in an unmarked grave of injustice." "Force my hand." They locked me in the room and took my phone. I could only sit there waiting for the police investigation. My dad and Leo sat right outside, chain smoking one cigarette after another. Whenever I locked eyes with my dad, I realized he didn't see me as his daughter anymore. To him, I was an enemy, a monster that had tortured him for 10 years. I didn't blame him. I did watch my mother get murdered. I saw the killer's face. I remembered everything. But no matter what he did, he would never get a single word out of my mouth. He loved my mom so much. After she died, getting revenge became the only thing keeping him alive. He had ruined his life, living like a ghost for 10 years just to find the killer. But he had found nothing. Then he discovered I could speak, that I wasn't actually mute from trauma, and that I was lying to him. I was hiding the truth. And then he found out about my assault, and the man who assaulted me had died a brutal death, his limbs broken and twisted, on a dark street corner just a week before my mom was killed. He suspected me. In his mind, I had a motive and I was crazy and ruthless enough to do it. He believed I hated my mother, hired someone to kill her, and that was why I refused to name her killer. It was a very logical theory. I didn't defend myself. I just silently waited for the police. Ring, ring. My dad's phone suddenly rang. He picked it up instantly. Detective Miller's voice, which I knew all too well, came through the speaker. "David, are you with Vivian?" My dad's voice was hoarse.
"Yes."
"Did Vivian have anything to do with that bastard's death?"
"Yes."
"Keep her there. We're on our way." The moment the call ended, my dad's fist crashed heavily into my face. "If you had the guts to kill the guy who hurt you, why did you have to hate your mother? She didn't call the cops because she loved you. Things were different back then. She was terrified of the rumors. Destroying your life before she came back home. She couldn't sleep at night. She would cry herself to sleep, holding your picture."
"How?"
"How could you?" He couldn't finish his sentence. He completely broke down, burying his face in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Leo smoked in silence, looking at me as if I were a stranger, a monster. I held my swollen cheek staring blankly at the ceiling. A tear slipped down my cheek. Feeling slightly warm, I quickly wiped it away, whispering to myself in my head, "It's almost over. Everything will end very soon." 20 minutes later, Detective Miller arrived with a few officers. He pulled out a pair of cold handcuffs and snapped them onto my wrists. "Vivian, you are under arrest in connection with a 10-year-old homicide. Come with us." In the interrogation room, Detective Miller put a crime scene photo on the table. Even though the man was dead, and even though 10 years had passed, seeing his face made me shudder uncontrollably. A deep primal fear shook my soul. This was the man who had stalked and assaulted me 10 years ago. It took me a long time to calm my breathing. Miller spoke. "Do you know him?" I nodded.
"How?"
There was no point in hiding it anymore. I reached for the pen to write it down, but Miller coughed. "Cut the act, Vivian. Your dad told us you can talk. You're not mute." I let out a bitter smile, dropped the pen, and spoke.
"He assaulted me."
"Why didn't you report it?"
"My mom wouldn't let me."
Miller's voice turned incredibly sharp and intense. So you took justice into your own hands and brutally murdered him? I shook my head. I didn't kill him. Still denying it. 10 years ago, we couldn't solve this case because of limited forensics, but after your dad prompted us to look into it again, we re-examined the victims. Preserved fingernail scrapings. We found your skin cells. The DNA is a perfect match. Before I could say anything, Miller stood up, leaning over the table to pressure me. Confess now and I'll talk to the DA for a plea deal. You were a minor 10 years ago. You won't get a long sentence. But if you keep fighting this, you will rot in prison for the rest of your life. Just blinked, my expression unchanged. I wasn't afraid of prison. 10 years ago, I had already prepared myself to spend the rest of my life behind bars. But now was not the time. Miller was bluffing. His evidence was weak, and he didn't have enough to convict me. I took a deep breath and looked him dead in the eye. I told you I didn't kill him. Then why is your DNA on his body? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't remember much from 10 years ago. If you have solid proof, lock me up. If you don't let me go after that. No matter what they asked, I remained dead silent. 48 hours later, they had nothing and they had to release me. But the moment I stepped out of the precinct, my dad and Leo forced me into their car. Detective Miller pretended not to see, staying close by, just to make sure things didn't get violent inside the car. My dad glared at me with bloodshot eyes. You talked to the detective. Drop the act. I'm asking you one last time what happened the night your mother died. I swear to God. Vivian, if you keep lying to me, I will do something crazy. You can hire a hitman.
So can I.
I have plenty of ways to make you talk. He looked completely insane. This unresolved case had lasted 10 years. 10 years of my mother's ghost begging for justice. It had driven everyone crazy. Honestly, I was losing my mind, too. Fortunately, I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Just wait. Give me one last month. In 1 month, I will tell you everything. My dad gritted his teeth, shaking with rage. Why a month? What game are you playing? I didn't answer. I looked out the window. Floating just outside the car was a soul that only I could see. The cold glass of the passenger window pressed against my forehead. The vibration of the engine rattling through my skull. Beside me, Uncle Leo drove in. Grim silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, my father, David, stared straight ahead, the orange glow of his cigarette illuminating the deep, hollow caverns of his eyes. Outside, drifting effortlessly alongside the speeding sedan, was my mother. She did not fly so much as she was pulled by the wind, her form a translucent, ash-gray silhouette. Her hair, which had been a vibrant auburn in life, floated around her head like smoke. Her clothes were the singed, blackened rags of the nightgown she had died in. She did not look at the road, nor did she look at the men in the front seat. Her hollow, milky eyes were locked entirely on me. She raised a phantom hand, her fingers blackened by soot, and pressed it against the glass of my window. No sound came, but her lips moved in a slow, rhythmic cadence. Soon, my darling.
Soon.
I didn't blink. I didn't turn away. I had spent 10 years learning how to look at the dead without flinching. You're doing it again. My father's raspy voice cut through the hum of the engine. He didn't turn around, but I could see his eyes in the rearview mirror, tracking my gaze. You're staring at nothing, whispering to nothing. What's out there, Vivian? Who are you talking to? I remained silent, my lips pressed into a tight, bloodless line. Let her be, David, Leo murmured, his voice thick with a forced, patronizing weariness. She's unstable. The trauma, it does things to the mind. We just need to get her home. We'll wait out her month. If she doesn't speak, then we let the law handle her. I looked at the back of Leo's head. His hair was thick, styled, and untouched by the gray that had ravaged my father. He looked prosperous. He wore a heavy wool coat and an expensive watch, the spoils of a man who had successfully rebuilt his life on the ashes of our family. He didn't know that my mother's ghost was currently resting her cheek against the glass of his driver's side window, staring at him with a hunger that could swallow the night. To understand why I stayed silent for 10 years, you have to understand the night of the fire. The police believed a ruthless burglar had broken into our home, tortured my mother to find the combination to our small floor safe, murdered her, and then set the house ablaze to destroy the forensic evidence. They believed I had survived by hiding in a crawlspace, emerging only after the killer had fled. They were half right. I was in the crawlspace, but I hadn't hidden there from the beginning. On the night of the murder, I had been asleep in my second-floor bedroom when The sound of shattering glass woke me. I crept down the stairs, the floorboards, cold beneath my bare feet. Through the cracked door of the living room, I saw him. It wasn't a stranger. It was Uncle Leo. He had my mother pinned to the floor. He didn't want money.
He wanted the
Ledger, the physical records of the shipping and transport business he and my father ran. My mother, who had taken over the accounting to help my father, had discovered that Leo was using their trucks to smuggle high-grade narcotics across the border. She had threatened to go to the federal authorities. "Where is it, Susan?" Leo had whispered, his voice devoid of the warm, jovial uncle persona I had known my entire life. He held a heavy hunting knife to her throat. "Tell me where you kept the copies. Your husband doesn't need to know. He's too stupid to understand anyway. Just tell me and I walk out." "Never." My mother had choked out, her face bruised and bloodied. "You ruined this family, Leo. You targeted my daughter." That was the moment the puzzle pieces had clicked into place for her, and for me. The stalker who had assaulted me in the rainy alley 3 months prior hadn't been a random predator. He was a local thug named Marcus, a man who worked dock security for Leo's shipping company. Leo had hired Marcus to stalk me, to terrify me, so that my mother would be forced to retreat back to our small town. To protect me, effectively removing her from the city offices where she was digging into the company's financial records. But Marcus had gone too far. He had let his own depraved desires take over in that dark alley. When my mother realized the connection, she had gone after Marcus herself.
she
Didn't call the police because she knew the police in our small town were on Leo's peril. Instead, she had confronted Marcus with a desperation only a mother could possess. But she hadn't killed him. Leo had. Leo killed Marcus to silence him, to ensure Marcus could never point the finger back to him. And then, he framed Marcus's death to look like a brutal street mugging, staging the scene and placing my DNA, which he had harvested from the blood-soaked clothes my mother had kept in our laundry hamper after my assault, onto Marcus's fingernails. It was a fail-safe. If the police ever dug too deep, they would find my DNA, keeping my father and me trapped in a web of suspicion and fear, unable to speak. And then Leo came for my mother. I watched from the shadows as Leo drove the blade into her chest, over and over, his face blank, his movements mechanical. When she finally stopped moving, he poured accelerant over the carpet, her body, and the furniture. As the flames began to lick the walls, Leo turned toward the hallway.
I
Scrambled backward, diving into the narrow crawl space beneath the pantry.
floorboards.
But I wasn't fast enough. The door was still settling when Leo reached it. He pulled the hatch open, his blood-splattered face illuminated by the growing fire. He reached down, grabbed me by my hair, and dragged me out. The heat was already suffocating, the smoke thick and black. He didn't kill me. Instead, he leaned close, his breath hot against my ear, the smell of my mother's blood clinging to his clothes. "Listen to me very carefully, Vivian," he had whispered, his grip tightening, until my scalp felt like it was tearing. "Your father is on his way back from the county line. If you say one word, if you write a single letter, if you make a single sound to the police, to your father, to anyone, I will burn him alive too. I'll make it look like an accident. I'll make sure he suffers 10 times worse than your mother did. You keep your mouth shut, and your daddy gets to live."
Do
"We have an agreement." I was 16. I was covered in my mother's blood, watching her body burn.
I
Nodded. And from that second onward, I became a ghost. The car pulled up to the curb outside my apartment building. My father got out. First, his posture hunched, his eyes darting around the dark street as if expecting an ambush. Leo followed, his hand firm on my shoulder as he guided me up the stairs to my third-floor studio. They locked the door behind us. My father immediately confiscated my laptop, throwing it into a duffel bag along with my phone. "You stay here," David said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "For the next month, you don't leave this room. I've taken a leave of absence from work. Leo and I will take turns watching you. You wanted 30 days, Vivian? You got them. But at the end of these 30 days, if you don't give us the name of the man who killed Susan, I'm taking you back to Detective Miller myself. I'll testify against you. I'll tell them how you hated her.
I'll
Tell them everything." I walked over to my small twin bed and sat down, pulling my knees to my chest.
I
Didn't look at him. I looked at the corner of the room. My mother was standing there. She was more solid now than she had been in the car. The draft in the apartment made her smoky dress billow. She raised a finger, pointing it directly at Leo. who was currently setting up a folding chair by the door. "You're a quiet one, aren't you?" Leo said, trying to sound conversational as he
sat down.
He pulled a flask from his pocket and took a long drag. 10 years of silence. It's almost impressive. But your father's right, Viv. The truth always comes out. You can't outrun it. I looked at him, my expression blank, but inside, my heart was hammering. Just 30 days, I thought to myself. Just 30 days until the excavation. The ruins of our old home had sat vacant for nearly a decade, a blackened scar, on the edge of town. But 6 months ago, a major commercial developer had purchased the land to build the Meridian Plaza, a massive luxury apartment and retail complex. Leo was one of the primary local investors in the project. He had used his political connections to fast-track the permits. What he didn't know, what no one knew except me and the ghost of my mother, was that before setting the fire 10 years ago, Leo had disposed of the evidence in the old, deep stone well in our
Backyard.
He had thrown his blood-soaked clothes, the hunting knife, and the ledger my mother had hidden into a heavy, waterproof military surplus box, bound it with heavy chains, and dropped it down the 100-foot well shaft. Then he had capped the well with a massive concrete slab and covered it with dirt, believing it would be buried forever beneath the ruins. But the blueprints for the new Meridian Plaza required a 3-story underground parking garage. The excavation plans called for digging 30 feet below the original foundation, straight through the area where the old well sat. According to the construction schedule I had meticulously tracked online, the heavy earth movers were scheduled to reach the quadrant containing the old well in exactly 4 weeks. If I told my father the truth now, if I pointed the police to the well, Leo would find out. As a primary investor with unlimited access to the site, he would use his power to halt construction, go in at night with his own crew, dig up the box, and destroy the evidence forever. Nay, he would probably kill my father and me the moment he realized the secret was out. I had to wait. I had to let the excavation proceed naturally. The developers had hired an independent, state-appointed environmental inspection team to monitor the deep dig due to the site's history. When the excavators hit the concrete cap and pulled up the heavy metal box, the state inspectors would be obligated to report it directly to the state police, bypassing the corrupt local precinct. Until then, I had to survive under the watchful eyes of my mother's killer. The first week was a slow, agonizing test of endurance. My father and Leo split the shifts. My father took the days. Leo took the
nights.
During the day, the apartment was filled with an oppressive, suffocating grief. My father would sit at my small kitchen table, surrounded by old newspaper clippings, police reports, and my mother's diary. He had aged 20 years in the span of 10. His hands shook constantly, a tremor he tried to hide by gripping his coffee mug with both hands. "Why, Vivian," he would whisper to the empty room, his voice cracking.
She
"Loved you. She made mistakes. God knows she made mistakes, but she was trying to
protect you. How could you let her die like that?
How could you watch it and say nothing?" I wanted so badly to reach out to him. I wanted to tell him that I loved him, that every silent breath I took was a shield to keep him alive. But I couldn't. My mother's spirit would stand right behind him, her hands resting gently on his hunched shoulders. She would look at me and shake her head, her eyes filled with a warning. "Not yet, my baby. If he knows, he will confront Leo. And Leo will
kill him."
She was right. My father was a broken man, fueled only by a desperate, reckless need for vengeance. If he found out his brother-in-law, his business partner, his trusted friend was the monster, he would ride to Leo's house with a gun and end up dead or in prison before the truth could be legally proven. At night, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted from grief to pure, cold terror. When Leo was on duty, my father would leave, and the door would click shut.
The
air would immediately grow heavy. Leo didn't sit at the table. He would pace the room, his eyes scanning every corner, his gaze occasionally landing on me with a calculating, predatory intensity. On the 10th night, my father left early to buy groceries. The moment the door locked, Leo walked over to my bed. He stood over me, his shadow swallowing me
whole.
"You think you're playing a clever game, Vivian," he whispered, his voice low. "And dangerous." He reached out, his thick fingers grabbing my chin, forcing me to look up at him. "I don't know what you think you saw 10 years ago. I don't know what you think you're going to do in 30 days. But let me remind you of something." He leaned in closer, and I could smell the expensive cologne masking the faint, sour scent of sweat. Your father's heart is weak. He's stressed. It would be so easy for him to have a sudden, tragic stroke. Or maybe a car accident on his way home from the grocery store. The roads are very slick this time of year. My body went completely rigid. I clenched my teeth, staring at him with a fury that burned like hot coal. That's it, Leo whispered, a cruel, mocking smile stretching across his face. Show me that anger. You can talk, can't you? Come on, Viv. Say something.
Tell
Me what a monster I am. Tell me how much you hate me. I didn't make a sound. I forced my muscles to relax, my eyes going blank, staring right through him as if he were nothing but air. He let go of my chin with a disgusted grunt. Stupid girl. You're just like your mother.
stubborn to the end.
But she broke. And so will you. Behind him, the spirit of my mother stood. Her face was no longer sorrowful.
It
was twisted into a mask of pure, demonic rage. Her jaw unhinged, her mouth opening into a silent, screaming void of black smoke. The temperature in the room plummeted. The lights in the apartment flickered, the cheap light bulbs buzzing violently. Leo paused, shivering. He looked around the room, rubbing his arms. Drafty place, he muttered, walking back to his chair. I looked at my mother. She slowly closed her mouth, her form settling back into a quiet, watchful vigil. Patience, her eyes seemed to say. Patience. By the third week, the psychological toll was becoming unbearable. I was barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the crackle of flames, the screams of my mother, and the heavy, metallic thud of Marcus tackling me into
the mud.
The police were still circling. Detective Miller called my father daily, asking if I had spoken. My father's frustration was boiling over. He had started drinking again, leaving empty whiskey bottles on the counter. One afternoon, while Leo was away and my father was passed out asleep at the table, my mother's ghost drifted close to me. She didn't speak in words, but when she touched my forehead with her cool, smoky fingers, images flooded my
mind.
I saw the construction site. I saw the giant yellow excavators clawing at the earth, tearing through layers of gravel and clay. I saw the rusted, yellow caution tape fluttering in the wind. And then I saw the well. The concrete slab that had covered it for 10 years was cracked. The heavy steel teeth of a backhoe were clawing at the dirt around it. But there was a problem. In my vision, I saw Leo standing at the edge of the pit, pointing a finger. He was talking to a man in a hard hat, the site foreman. Money was changing hands. I saw the excavator stop. I saw Leo pointing to a flatbed truck. He's going to move it, I realized with a jolt of panic. Leo was no fool. He knew the excavation was getting close to the old foundation. Even if he didn't think anyone knew about the well, he wouldn't risk the construction crew finding a sealed, chained metal box in a hidden well shaft on his property. He was planning to oversee the dig of that specific quadrant himself, under the guise of investor inspection, and quietly remove the box before the state inspectors could examine it. I sat up on the bed, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I looked at the calendar on the wall. There were 10 days left. I couldn't wait 10 days. If I waited, Leo would get to the box first. I had to change the timeline. I had to force the excavation to happen sooner, and I had to make sure the police, not just any police, but the state forensic unit were there when it happened. I looked at my father, who was snoring softly, his head resting on his arms amid the scattered papers. I slipped off the bed, making no sound. I crept toward the table. My father's phone was sitting right next to his hand. I reached out, my fingers trembling. If he woke up, if he caught me, the whole plan would shatter. My mother's spirit drifted over, hovering directly above my father. She blew a cold, gentle breath across the back of his neck. My father muttered something in his sleep, shifting his weight, turning his head away from the phone. I snatched the device. I quickly retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I turned on the sink faucet to mask any noise. My fingers flew across the screen. I didn't call the local police. I knew Detective Miller was too close to the local politics, and Leo had too many friends in the precinct. Instead, I opened the browser and navigated to the official tip portal for the State Environmental Protection Agency and the State Police Major Crimes Division. I typed out an anonymous tip, using precise, professional language, to the State Environmental Protection Agency and State Police Major Crimes. Under the foundation of the former property at 414 Oak Street, currently the Meridian Plaza construction site. There is a concealed, deep-water well shaft. This well contains a sealed, pressurized metal container containing highly toxic chemical waste, mercury, and industrial solvents, illegally dumped by the former owners of the transport company. Furthermore, this container is believed to hold physical evidence related to the unresolved homicide of Susan Vance from 10 years ago. The excavation of this quadrant is scheduled for next week, but the developers plan to covertly excavate and dispose of the container without reporting it to avoid environmental fines and legal scrutiny. An immediate, emergency federal, state environmental stop work order is required to conduct a forensic excavation of the well shaft before the site is contaminated further. I hit send. The screen flashed. Tip received. Thank you for helping keep our state safe. I deleted the browser history, cleared the cache, and stepped out of the bathroom. I quietly placed the phone back next to my father's hand. As I walked back to my bed, I looked at my mother. She smiled, a beautiful, tragic expression that warmed the cold room. Now, I thought, we wait for the storm. The reaction was swifter than I could have hoped. 2 days later, the quiet of the morning was shattered by the sound of sirens. Down the street. From my window, I couldn't see the construction site, but my father's phone began to ring incessantly. He woke up with a start, grabbing the phone. Leo? What's going on? I watched his face pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. What do you mean the state police are there? A federal stop work order? Hazardous waste. My father stood up, knocking his chair over. What does that have to do with Susan's case? They have a warrant to excavate the old backyard? Right now. My heart leaped into my throat. It was happening. I'm coming down there, David said, his voice shaking. He hung up and grabbed his coat. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Vivian, did you do this? How could you have? Before he could finish his thought, the apartment door was unlocked from the outside. Leo burst in, his face flushed, his eyes wild with a panic I had never seen in him before. David, we have to go. Now, Leo said, his voice tight and breathless.
The
state police have blocked off the entire site. They brought in heavy forensic
gear.
Some anonymous tipster told them there's evidence related to Susan's murder buried in the old well. Leo's eyes darted to me, and for a split second, I saw a passing shadow of absolute, murderous terror in his gaze. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. I was behind this. We're taking her with us, Leo said, grabbing my arm with a grip that bruised. If they find something, she needs to be there to identify it. She's the eyewitness, right? Leo, wait. My father said, hesitating. If the police are there, shouldn't we let them do their job? Their job? Leo snarled, his mask slipping for a fraction of a second. They're tearing up my construction site. They're costing me millions. We're going down. There, David.
Now.
My father, too broken and confused to argue, followed us out the door. The air at the construction site was thick with a smell of wet earth, diesel, fumes, and rain. A heavy, gray downpour had started, mirroring the thunderstorm of the night I was assaulted and the night my mother died. The site was a chaotic mess of flashing blue and red lights. Multiple state police cruisers, an environmental protection agency van, and a mobile forensic lab unit were parked around the perimeter. Yellow tape blocked off the entrance, keeping a small crowd of curious onlookers and local reporters at bay. Leo pushed through the crowd, flashing his investor credentials to a state trooper. I'm Leo Vance. I own a stake in this property. What the hell is going on here? A tall, stern-faced man in a black trench coat stepped forward, holding a badge. Special Agent Vance, State Police Major Crimes. We received a highly specific, credible tip regarding buried hazardous materials and evidence linked to an active homicide investigation. We have a state warrant to excavate the historical well shaft on this quadrant. This is ridiculous, Leo shouted, his voice cracking against the wind. The old well was filled in and capped 10 years ago. There's nothing down there but dirt and concrete. Then we'll find nothing but dirt and concrete, sir, Agent Vance replied.
Coolly.
But until our forensic team certifies the area, this site is active. Crime scene. Please step back behind the barrier. My father stood next to me, his umbrella shaking in his hand. He looked at the deep pit that had been dug into the earth. At the bottom of the pit, 30 feet below the street level, the excavation crew had uncovered the circular stone lip of the old well. The massive concrete cap Leo had placed over it was cracked, and a team of state police officers in hazmat suits was currently rigging heavy steel cables around it, attaching them to a massive crane. I looked up. Standing on the edge of the pit, completely untouched by the rain, was my mother. She wasn't alone anymore. Standing beside her was another figure. He was tall, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles, his face pale and rain-splashed. It was Marcus, the stalker.
He
Looked at Leo with a hollow, terrifying gaze, his jaw slack. They were waiting, ready to lift. A worker shouted through a megaphone. The crane's engine roared, the thick steel cables tensioning with a metallic
screech.
With a massive, sucking groan, the concrete cap was hoisted out of the pit, revealing the dark, yawning void of the well shaft. A collective breath seemed to be held by everyone at the site. Lowering the camera, a forensic technician announced, guiding a high-tech probe on a wire down into the darkness. We watched the video monitor inside the State Police Command tent. The camera descended rapidly through the damp, stone-lined walls of the well. 30 feet, 50 feet, 80 feet. At 95 feet, the camera hit water. The image grew murky, but as the technician toggled the infrared light, a shape emerged from the darkness. It was a large, rectangular metallic object, bound tightly with heavy, rusted
chains.
"We have a target," the technician whispered. "It's a military surplus. Footlocker. Wrapped in chains. It's definitely down there." Leo's face drained of all color. He took a step backward, his eyes darting toward the exit of the site. "Agent Vance," Leo said, his voice trembling as he tried to maintain his composure. I need to make a call to my attorney. This is a massive violation of my property rights." "You can make your call, Mr. Vance," the agent said, his eyes narrowing as he watched Leo's reaction. "But you're not leaving the site. Not until we pull that box up." It took 2 agonizing hours to fish the container out of the well. The rain grew heavier, turning the mud beneath our feet into a slick, gray soup. Nobody left. My father stood frozen, his eyes locked on the crane as it slowly pulled the heavy, dripping metal box from the depths of the earth. When the box finally cleared the lip of the well, a collective gasp went through the crowd. It was covered in a thick layer of green algae and rust, but the heavy chains wrapping it were still intact. The forensic team carefully placed it onto a clean plastic tarp inside the mobile lab tent. Agent Vance looked at my father, then at Leo, and finally at me. "We are going to open the container now under emergency forensic protocols. Mr. Vance, as the family of the victim, you have a right to observe, but you must remain behind the glass partition." We stood inside the viewing area of the mobile lab. A technician in protective gear used an industrial angle grinder to slice through the rusted padlocks and chains. Sparks flew through the damp air, the harsh screech of metal against metal echoing in the tight space. With a loud, metallic pop, the locks gave way. The technician slowly pried open the heavy steel lid of the footlocker. Even through the sealed glass, I could feel the weight of what was inside. The technician carefully reached in, pulling out a series of items and placing them onto the stainless steel table. First was a heavy, rusted hunting knife with a black handle. Even after 10 years underwater, the dark, dried stains of blood were visible on the serrated blade. Second was a bundle of rotted, dark blue fabric, a mechanic's jumpsuit, the exact uniform Leo used to wear when he worked in the transport garage. And third, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof plastic, was a thick, leather-bound book. The technician carefully unwrapped the plastic, revealing the ledger. He opened the first page, his eyes scanning the columns of names, dates, and dollar amounts, records of narcotics shipments dating back a decade, all signed with Leo Vance's distinctive initials. "Oh my God," my father whispered, his hands flying to his mouth. He looked at the ledger, then at the knife, and then at Leo.
"Leo, what is that?" "That's
your knife. I gave you that knife for your birthday 12 years ago." Leo didn't answer. He was backed against the corner of the tent, his breath coming in shallow, panicked wheezes. "And those clothes?" My father's voice broke into a ragged sob. "Those are your work clothes." "Leo, what did you do? What did you do to my Susan?" "It's a setup," Leo screamed, his eyes bulging as he pointed a shaking finger at
me.
"She did it. Vivian put those things there. She's been planning this.
She
hated her mother. She hated me. She's a psycho." "Mr. Vance," Agent Vance said, his voice cold as ice as he stepped into the tent. accompanied by 3 armed state troopers. The well was sealed and capped. 10 years ago, immediately after the fire, Vivian was 16 years old, hospitalized with severe trauma, and has been under constant surveillance or living in a studio apartment ever since. She didn't have the heavy machinery required to lift a 2-ton concrete slab, drop a chained military safe down a 100-foot shaft, and reseal it. The agent pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. Leo Vance, you are under arrest for the murder of Susan Vance, the murder of Marcus Tully, and multiple federal counts of smuggling and narcotics trafficking. You have the right to remain silent.
No, no.
Leo shrieked, kicking and struggling as the troopers grabbed his arms, slamming him against the metal table. You don't understand. She's a monster. She watched her mother die, and she didn't say a word. She let me do
it.
As the troopers dragged Leo out of the tent into the pouring rain, he locked eyes with me one last time. You silent little bitch, he screamed, spit flying from his lips. You killed your mother. Your silence killed her. I didn't blink. I stood there, watching him get shoved into the back of a state police cruiser. Beside the car, my mother and Marcus stood. As the cruiser pulled away, their forms began to blur, the harsh lines of their smoky bodies softening in the rain. Marcus turned, walking into the shadows of the construction site, finally free of his tether. My mother remained. She walked over to the glass partition of the tent, standing directly in front of me. She raised her hand, placing it against the glass, matching my own hand. Thank you, my brave girl, she whispered into my mind. You can speak now.
He can
never hurt you again. She smiled, a brilliant, radiant light breaking through her smoky form, and then, like mist in the morning sun, she vanished. The tent went quiet, save for the sound of the rain drumming against the canvas roof and the muffled, agonizing sobs of my father. He was on his knees on the muddy floor, his head in his hands, his entire body shaking as the realization of his betrayal washed over him. He had spent 10 years hating his daughter, chasing ghosts, and sharing his grief with the monster who had ripped his life apart. I'm sorry, he wept, his voice barely a whisper. Susan?
I'm so sorry.
Vivian. Oh God, Vivian. What have I done to you? I walked over to him. My knees felt weak, the weight of 10 years of silence pressing down on my chest, like a physical stone. For a decade, I had kept my mouth shut to keep him alive. I had endured his hatred, his suspicion, and his despair, all to ensure that Leo's threat would never be realized. I knelt down in the mud beside him. I reached out, my hands trembling as I placed them on his hunched shoulders.
He
flinched at first, then looked up at me, his eyes red, swollen, and filled with a deep, agonizing shame. I opened my mouth. My vocal cords felt tight, dry, and foreign, like a machine that hadn't been used in a lifetime. I took a deep breath, the wet, ozone-scented air filling my lungs. Dad, I said. The word was quiet, raspy, and barely audible over the rain, but to my father, it was a thunderclap. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. He stared at me, his lips trembling. Vivian, you talked. I had to keep you safe, I whispered, my voice growing stronger, warmer, as the tears finally spilled over my eyelashes. Leo told me the night of the fire if I said a word, he would kill you too. He would make it look like an accident. My father let out a broken, strangled cry. He threw his arms around me, pulling me into a fierce, desperate embrace, burying his face in my neck. I'm so sorry, Vivian, he sobbed, his tears hot against my skin. I was so
blind.
I was so angry. I should have protected you. I should have known. It's okay, Dad, I murmured, wrapping my arms tight around his back, holding onto him as the storm raged around us. It's over. We're safe now. As we sat there in the mud, holding onto each other, I looked up at the gray
sky.
The heavy clouds were finally beginning to part, a single, pale beam of sunlight cutting through the rain, illuminating the spot where my mother had stood. For the first time in 10 years, the world was completely quiet.
And for the
first time in 10 years, I was finally, truly free.